What's up, guys, and thanks for tuning back into the Token Metrics YouTube channel. In this video, I want to go over several realistic price scenario models for Luna's peak price this market cycle. So let's get right into it and zoom into where Luna has been trading at recently. At the time of this screenshot last night, it was trading at just under $20, but today we've seen a little bit of a correction down to around $18. So we've been trading between $18 and $20 since our most recent peak. All right, so we had this nice linear trend line on a logarithmic chart, which equates to exponential growth, and we've actually mooned up off of that. All right, so Luna has just gone completely parabolic and has seen a high rate of growth and is currently 1,100% overvalued against its last trend line, its most recent trend line. Okay, I'm a big believer in that most of the time when cryptocurrencies do moon off of its initial trend line, it will eventually return to that trend line and retest it. Now, whether it follows this pattern that I've outlined or sees a sharper correction and then a bounce, or even continues on higher before coming back down to retest the trend line is to be determined, right? But just I've highlighted this trend line that we saw for Luna back in 2020, where we were on a linear trend line, mooned off of it, had two leg ups, and then came back down to retest it before going sideways and then continuing onwards and upwards. All right, so just because I drew this pattern here doesn't mean that's what the pattern that I'm expecting this to follow. In fact, here's a scenario where if the bull market were to continue to last longer and Luna was able to continue its growth rate, we could potentially see more of a logarithmic peak at around $200 or a 1,500% overvaluation against its trend line before coming back down to retest it sometime in late 2021. This is one scenario that I could see happening. But as far as determining which scenario is more likely, let's dig in and create several different scenario models for Luna's peak price this market cycle. And one thing I did want to mention before we dive into that is that just to give another example of a cryptocurrency that is blown up and mooned off of its trend line, Chainlink. It has done this time and time again where it does get overvalued against its trend line. It makes 2 or 3 legs up and then comes back down eventually and retests its linear trend line. And you see this with a lot of cryptocurrencies. So I just want to give a word of warning, and of course this isn't financial advice, but if you think that it's a good idea to buy up here, there is significant risk that it will come back down and test the trend line in the shorter term scenarios. Okay, so just be aware that that's a pattern that occurs fairly frequently with cryptocurrencies, especially when they blow up. All right. So this is Luna's dominance, and what we're going to do here is we're going to create several different scenarios for Luna's dominance, and then we're going to throw it in a matrix against our total cryptocurrency market cap scenarios. Okay, so if you're unfamiliar with what dominance is, it's nothing more than market share, and it's the market share of the total cryptocurrency market cap, which has currently been between 1.7 and 1.8 trillion dollars recently. Okay, so we've been on this somewhat of a linear trend line here that if we were to continue on and maybe come back down to sometime in July of this market cycle, Luna's dominance would be between 0.25% and 0.5%. Right, so 0.5% is currently roughly where Luna's at right now, just under 0.5%. So that's a relevant scenario. And then we want to build in this more bearish scenario of 0.25% in case we break this trend line and come back down, and maybe we even break the more flat trend line with the lower slope here, just like we broke the trend line back here in 2020 before going back up. We also want to build in 2 bullish scenarios at 1.0% and 2.0% market dominance for Luna this market cycle, just in case it continues to see this parabolic growth here where it continues to climb on this more steep trend line. Now, As far as which scenarios I feel are more likely, I think that somewhere between this 0.25% and 0.5% is more likely for Luna. I think Luna and the market narratives that have driven this price up are somewhat running out of steam right now, especially in that narrative it was Ethereum's lack of scalability. Okay, and DeFi potentially moving to other blockchains such as Solana, such as Terra, such as Cardano. And I think Ethereum is probably bled about as much as it plans to bleed, and it has some fixes on the horizon with EIP 1559, making it more scalable, making Ethereum potentially deflationary in nature. So I'm not sure how much more juice this narrative has in it to push these other blockchains like Terra, which Luna is the native cryptocurrency on, up to 1% or 2% market dominance. Is it possible? Absolutely. But is it likely? I feel like the most likely scenario here is probably 0.5% or even 0.25% dominance for Luna this market cycle. All right, so let's take a look at 3 scenarios for our total cryptocurrency market cap, which has been on a linear trend line on its logarithmic chart, which equates to exponential growth. So the total cryptocurrency space, all the money coming into it has been growing at an exponential rate since 2014. Now, occasionally we get these big bubbles above our trend line. In 2014, we were 1,600% overvalued against this trend line. In 2017 and 2018, we were 2,600% overvalued against this trend line. And we are currently on a path over the last 6 months, right? These are monthly candles. We have been on this trend line where we have departed our initial linear trend line, and we are headed towards roughly a $5 trillion market cap by sometime in July. Now, we don't know how long this bull market's going to last, so we can build several different scenarios. Maybe we taper out and we take a more conservative scenario, and we either the market cycle doesn't last until July, or the growth slows down and we only hit a $3 trillion market cap. The trend we're currently on by July would be $5 trillion in market cap. Now, could we potentially hit a $10 trillion market cap? That would be over 5x where we currently are. And we can actually gut check ourselves and say, would that be reasonable by July to hit a $10 trillion market cap? It might be a stretch by July, but if the bull market continues longer with the trend that we're on, sometime by the end of 2021, we could reasonably see this. And even if we did see this by July, we would have an overvaluation against this trend line of roughly 1,500%, which historically isn't that absurd, right? We've seen overvaluations against this trend line of 1,500, 1,600%, all the way up to 2,600% in our last market cycle. So these are our 3 market cap, total cryptocurrency market cap scenarios. Now, if we cross-reference that into a matrix with our Luna dominance scenarios, we can calculate some price predictions for Luna this market cycle. All right, so all we're doing here is we're taking our total cryptocurrency market cap and we're multiplying by our market dominant scenarios for Luna, and then we're just dividing by the total amount of Luna tokens in circulation. For the sake of this exercise, I have ignored any potential inflation or deflation for the Luna token because we're dealing with somewhat of a short-term time frame, really just looking out to July and maybe towards the end of the year. Inflation and deflation could affect these projections, but only by a couple percent in either direction. So it's not worth making an assumption for the sake of this exercise. All right, so in our most bearish or most conservative scenario, the total cryptocurrency market cap increases from where it's at today at $1.7, $1.8 trillion and goes on to about $3 trillion. I think this is a conservative scenario for the total crypto space this market cycle, but it's somewhat realistic. And in this most bearish scenario, our Luna dominance drops to 0.25%, maybe because it's overvalued right now. It's maybe in this scenario, Luna really needs to cool off and see a correction. And in that case, we kind of see the price stay relatively stagnant. Maybe in the short term we see it correct and then come back up towards $18, $19, $20. So that's our more conservative, more bearish scenario for Luna. In our most bullish scenario, and I almost considered blurring these 4 blocks out just because I don't want people thinking that I'm predicting a price of Luna in the realm of $500 this market cycle. I think that's extremely unlikely. I think it's highly, highly unlikely. I think going to $10 trillion in total cryptocurrency market cap is honestly somewhat unlikely compared to the $5 trillion scenario, but it's realistic. But I do think that the 2% scenario model that we built in, where Luna just continues this leg up and goes to 2% market dominance, right? When you start rising in market dominance this much, you have to take or steal market dominance away from other large cryptocurrencies. And I don't know that Luna will be able to continue stealing market dominance and even 4 or 5x in market dominance from where it's at right now to reach this 2% model. But I wanted to build this in there just because that's the trend line we're currently on. And by not building it in there, I don't think we're doing ourselves any favors. Because we want to consider every possible scenario. All right, so if that were to occur, it's a useful exercise, in my opinion, to understand that Luna could, in that scenario, if everything goes right for the total cryptocurrency market cap and Luna just continues this insane parabolic run that it's on, it could go to roughly $500. Do I think that's even a little bit likely? No, I don't. I think a more likely scenario for Luna this market cycle is probably $62. And if we want to be really, really bullish on Luna and the Terra blockchain, we could say even maybe $123, $124, right? So those are the kind of this is the block of scenarios. Maybe this one here, $75 or $62 shows up twice, and then $124 shows up twice in our matrix. For me, I think anywhere between $61 and maybe $75 is somewhat realistic for Luna this market cycle. All right, so this is just the same data, but in a chart form. Some people prefer charts over tables. All right, and you can just see here our green line is our $10 trillion market cap scenario, and then we've got our corresponding Luna dominance scenarios down here at the bottom. Okay, so in conclusion, if you had to ask me, I think a bearish scenario would be that Luna's a little bit overplayed right now. The trade is over and it kind of just goes sideways, or maybe sees a correction and trades at and peaks at around $18 this market cycle from this point forward. I know we've already peaked above $18 already, but in a more bearish scenario, maybe we don't see it trade above or too far above $18 in the future. That would be bearish. Realistic, I think, is $60 for Luna this market cycle. And if we want to be bullish but also reasonable, $123 or $124 for Luna this market cycle would be a bullish scenario, where from where it's at right now, that would be roughly a 6x. It could potentially do that. But if I just had to go with my most realistic price scenario from this modeling that we just did, I would say $60 for Luna this market cycle is totally realistic. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Thanks, and bye.